Christine, if you want to let in the Preservation Alliance. And Greg, that'd be great.
Hi, Kenzie.
Hi, Lynn. Lovely to see you.
Yes, lovely to see you. You've been busy.
Yeah, just a little.
Yeah.
Great. And we've got Greg, Adam, Allison. Perfect. So we're just waiting a couple of minutes on Counselor Edwards. I see we've got the chief in. So yeah, we're just gonna hang on for a couple of minutes for the chair. She is gonna be on shortly.
Sure. I'm here sort of, my computer's being a little slow, so I've got to wait for Scotty needs to beam me up fully. I'm only in transit apparently.
Well, you've got a beautiful picture of City Hall, so you know, what more can we ask for?
There I am.
And does anyone know, we've got a phone number in as an attendee. I don't know if that's anybody associated with anybody.
I haven't received any requests for the link, so I'm not sure who that is.
Okay, well, if anyone realizes it's their associate, let us know. Otherwise, we'll look forward to having them as an attendee.
It might be Roseanne. She just came into my office and she can't get in. Are you trying to phone her for the computer?
I'm just on the phone because I couldn't get in.
Roseanne, are you an 857 number?
Is your number are you an 857 number?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, all right, Christine, can you let Roseanne in on the phone?
Roseanne,
I'm trying to, but it's not letting me promote her. Oh, wait a minute.
It can't be promoted for some reason.
Huh. And Roseanne, you don't have a
she's gonna try to get back on her computer.
okay, I was gonna say like a
Okay.
video might work better.
She did say that she tried and for some reason it wasn't allowing her, but she'll try again.
Yeah, I can hit allow to talk, but it's not letting me promote her for some reason.
All right, let's see if we can get the computer working and hopefully that will.
And Christine, I think we've been joined by the chair.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Thank you all. There we go. All right. So I'm gonna do the house cleaning kind of announcements, and I have a letter to read from one of our colleagues who couldn't be here. I'll announce then afterwards who's here in terms of the city councilors and administration, as well as other participants. And then I'll turn it over to the lead sponsor to walk us through kind of the changes and the conversation. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm City Councilor Lydia Edwards, Chair of the Committee on Government Operations. It is Wednesday, September 8th, and we are here today for a virtual working session on docket 0296, petition for a special law regarding an act relative to Boston Landmarks Commission. This matter was sponsored by Councilor Kenzie Bach, and Councilor Liz Braden was referred to the committee on February 3rd. The committee held a hearing on February 8th and a working session on February 18th. In accordance with Chapter 20 of the Act of 2021, modifying certain requirements of the open meeting law, we are having this working session virtually via Zoom. This enables the City Council to be able to conduct and carry out its responsibilities while adhering to public accommodations. The public may watch this working session via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv and on Xfinity 8, RCN 82, and Verizon 964. It will also be rebroadcasted at a later date. For public testimony, written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov and will be made part of the record and available to all councilors. This home rule petition will amend Section 2 of Chapter 772 of the Acts of 1975, as most recently amended in Section 11 of Chapter 373 of the Acts of 2018, by changing the definition of the term landmark. The change will allow for local resources that have historical significance in the community to be designated as landmarks. At the hearing, the committee discussed the current process for landmarking, the importance of local involvement, as well as the relationship between historic preservation and development. The committee discussed what resources with significance to the city's neighborhood should be able to be designated as landmarks. The committee recognized that having landmarks with local significance will provide equity and will allow the city of Boston to preserve its local history, as well as help its thriving tourism economy. At the February 8th working session, representatives from the Landmarks Commission participated, as well as representatives from preservation organizations and the Greater Boston Real Estate Board. The committee discussed the city of Philadelphia's local landmarking process. The committee discussed roles of the Landmarks Commission, the Boston Road Redevelopment Authority, and the ZBA, as well as ISD. The committee also reviewed suggested transition language changes in order to provide protections for certain projects. Since this working session, the committee will review the specific language of the proposal. Participating today on behalf of the administration, we have Lynn Smillage, Chair of the Boston Landmarks Commission, Roseanne Foley, Executive Director of the Boston Landmarks Commission, and Chief Mariama White Hammond. Our folks who will be panelists and also participating today, we have Greg Gaylor, Executive Director of the Boston Preservation Alliance, Greg Vassell, Chief Executive Officer of the Greater Boston Real Estate Board, and Adam Hunley. Participating today, along with myself and Councilor Bach, we have myself and Councilor Bach. Very well. And so just to quickly read into the record, a letter dated September 8th. Dear Chair Edwards, unfortunately, due to a scheduling conflict, I will not be able to be in attendance at today's Committee on Government Operations working session on docket 0296, petition for a special law regarding an act relative to the Boston Landmarks Commission. As an original co-sponsor of the home rule petition with Councilor Bach, I fully support the change in enabling legislation of the Landmarks Commission. This change would address a preservation obstacle that has long frustrated neighborhoods throughout the city and designated sites of local importance and significance. I look forward to continuing to support this petition as it advances through the committee to the council for action. I ask that you please read this letter to the public record. Sincerely, Liz Braden, Boston City Councilor, District 9. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Councilor Bach, who can walk us through kind of an orientation and any of the kind of, I guess, changes or thoughts that we've had since our February conversations. Then I will turn it over to the panelists. We'll start first with the administration and then just go right into the non-administration panelists, if that's okay, Councilor Bach, and let them all speak at once. And then if you have questions or if any of our colleagues join, they can ask those questions. So turning it over to Councilor Bach.
Sounds great. Thank you so much, Counselor Edwards. And Christine, I'm happy to share my screen as I walk through the memo. Is that all right, or do you want to do it? Any preference?
I'm fine with you doing it, Counselor.
Okay, great.
That's
I'll
okay.
do it. I'll do it in a second. So yeah, just to and this is very much, I think today it is our old school working sessions. We used to do these in the Curly room. So it's televised, but it's really more of a sort of brass tacks kind of thing. And I really just I want to express appreciation for all the folks who are on this call. I know we'll hear from them in a minute, but I think we had some really good sessions way back in February, focused on the fact that local landmarking, it's something that at this point cities all across the country and also across the river from us in Cambridge are able to do, and it's a standard that it makes sense to move towards for Boston in terms of preserving our significant history for the city, and really a more equitable, wider lens on that history. But also, one of the things that we do in government is try to provide people with legitimate expectations and processes that give them some predictability. And so, from our property owning perspective, it was incumbent upon us to think about what's the transition mechanisms that help protect those interests as well, so that everybody kind of feels fairly treated by this update. And so I'm going to pull up. So my office, we had conversations with lots of folks on this call, and let's see if I can share screen. We share. And so I've kind of tried to pull together a memorandum about sort of where we landed. So as I said, purpose of this really is to give Boston Landmarks Commission the right to landmark sites of local significance, because currently the phrasing of the Landmarks Commission statute at the state has been interpreted to mean that it has to be of Commonwealth or national significance, but not of city level significance. And this change requires only the simple replacement of an and with a comma. I had hoped that we could pass just that change, one line, and I thought it was very elegant, but and I remember, Adam, you complimenting me on the elegance and also saying, but it won't work for us. So just, that was the original idea, was though we could do this with just an and to a comma to change the standard. And again, local significance landmarking, it has become standard across the country. Grateful to the Preservation Alliance for this list of cities, but it really is just a sampling of cities across the country that have this standard at this point. I've been working a lot with Chief White Hammond around the fact that we really want to make sure that we're able to preserve neighborhood sites and the cultural history of our communities of color. It would be good if state and national historical narratives were themselves more diverse, and we all have to work on that. But we can't, in the meantime, let that be a barrier to preserving that broader history. And then the last point that Roseanne Foley really, raised for us, and I just want to underscore for folks, is that there is a mechanism of architectural conservation districts that has been used to protect single buildings of significance in the city. So there is a mechanism for doing this, but it's bureaucratically onerous. I think it's really not preferable for all concerned, both on the preservation side and the property owner side. And so, looking for a more straightforward way to achieve that seems like it's in the public interest here. I wanted to register that when we met in February, one of the things that was raised by counselors was the question of resources, in the sense that our Landmarks Commission, whether it has the adequate resources to do what it does today, and in a sense that is not true, and therefore, it's a little tricky to figure out how we're going to expand its remit. I'm proud to say that the council has since then supported significant increases in the BLC budget, including for staff raises, new staff, and some dedicated funds to tackle the study report backlog. And more on that in a moment. But I think recognizing that those two things go in tandem has been an important part of our conversation. And then the key remaining issue, and again, sort of where we last left off in February, is that our real estate community, I think, acknowledges that it's reasonable for us to want to protect the city's history. I've appreciated the spirit of partnership that Greb's brought to this, but that, they also want to make sure that we're providing predictability for property owners with sites currently under development. And so the question we've been having is sort of at what point and to whom does this shift in the standard apply? And are there sites that should be exempted from this change? And the initial conversations that we had, there were kind of two potential types of reasons why maybe something should be exempted. One was that if somebody had previously tried to landmark them under the current statute, maybe those ones, the new thing shouldn't apply to. And the other one was that development approvals had already been granted. So those were two of the suggestions from the Greater Boston Real Estate Board, the Boston Preservation Alliance, and others. Pointed out that the breadth of those exemptions had a few challenges for us. I mean, one was that approvals are often held for an extremely long time without action, and that on the someone tried once upon a time side, we might have a community site where somebody tried once upon a time, because it really is a site of real local significance, and the BLC wasn't able to go forward. But now people want to protect that. It might not even be under consideration for development, and we don't want to kind of cut off that possibility. So I made a little table because I was trying to sort of understand where we were, that has these two categories. So sort of, the question of, has the Landmark Commission taken some action on this site previously? Yes, no, it hasn't. Yeah, it rejected the petition at its preliminary hearing, where it doesn't go forward with a study report, or there was actually a negative vote after the second study report hearing. So those sort of as potential categories we talked about of relevance. And then, whether or not it had active approvals. And we were talking about lots of different types of approvals, but the basic question of, has it gone through this approval process? And I think that where we were initially was kind of like, on the Preservation Alliance side, looking to have only the things that have been, negatively rejected and had all their approvals be exempt from the new standard. And on the Greater Boston Real Estate Board side, trying to suggest that maybe it should just be the things that have never been touched by the BLC or an approval process. And so I think I'm caricaturing slightly, but just to kind of lay out for folks where I think we started. So what I'm proposing as a way forward here is kind of a compromise that has three components in this section of the memo. So the first is to have this change take effect on the next July 1st following passage up at the State House, because I think that it gives our property owning community advance notice that it's coming. And I also think that, vis-a-vis counselors' concerns about, do we have appropriate staffing and funding when this goes into effect? July 1st is, as everybody knows, the start of our fiscal year. So it kind of lines those things up. The second point would be to apply, to basically say that on that July 1st, when it becomes effective, anything that's currently sitting with active, approved, unexpired building permits or active, approved, unexpired variances on that date gets exempt from consideration under the new standard, right? So that the local significant standard doesn't apply to them for so long as those approvals remain unexpired. With the view that means that somebody who feels like they've gone through the process and now they're lining up their financing and everything doesn't suddenly have the tables turned. But at the same time, we're not setting up an infinite forever list of properties that will never be touched by this, because I don't think that's a reasonable thing for BLC to have to keep track of. But we are at that snapshot in time thinking about the projects that most need that predictability and protecting them from the change. I did put in here as a note just for folks, because it came up a few times in conversation, to know that building permits expire after 6 months if work is not started. And then variances after 2 years. There are mechanisms that exist for extending either of them for active projects, but those extensions are not indefinite. And each of them has a mechanism of expiration. And then one of the things we realized was that, the city, in terms of zoning relief, either the ZBA grants variances or in some cases, the zoning commission approves plan development areas, which then don't involve a variance. And so the proposal of how to deal with those, and that's a little trickier because they don't have the same expiration mechanism as the variance, would be to sort of say, okay, if you got a PDA on July 1st, you're exempted from the consideration for 2 years, because that's the same length as the variance standard, right? And then, so it's basically just making it parallel to variances. And then after that point, any portion of your property where you end up with an approved building permit is exempted while that's unexpired, right? So it sort of is allowing the same cascade of movement forward on an active project that's contemplated in point 2. So schematically, the way of thinking about that is this is sort of, it's a repeat of the chart we had up above. But this time really what we're doing is focusing on the question of unexpired approvals and making the ones that are eligible, but after that July 1st the enactment date, and then the ones that are exempt while approvals remain unexpired. So that's really, it's my effort at balancing the various things that I've heard from the parties on this front. I really I want us to get to something that everybody can support up at the State House, and kind of really successfully balance this goal of preserving our local history with the desire to provide predictable expectations to our real estate community. So that's the proposal I'm looking forward to discussing today. I know that it's not perfect from anybody's perspective. It's the fun of being a counselor. No one's ever totally happy, but that's kind of where we've landed. And I'd love Counselor Edwards at this point to kind of let folks weigh in with comments. And then I circulated, I'll just say while I have the floor that I circulated just before this kind of draft language, like what this would look like written up. I expect that people will need to sort of take that home and check my legalese. So, I'm not expecting everybody to have an instant reaction on that, but that language is an attempt to just faithfully write up this summary that I just discussed, 1, 2, 3. But I think that when we were discussing it before in the last working session, one of the barriers to sort of a clarity of discussion was that when you put these things down in black and white, the language, it just becomes very legal-easy, and it's a little easy sometimes to lose track of what our categories are and what we're talking about. So my hope today is that we can just sort of talk through this memo. But I have circulated that, and I will throw it up on the screen, Counselor, and make sure it's part of the record here today. So thanks, Madam Chair. I think that's my effort at a quick summary.
Thank you very much. We've also been joined by Counselor Flynn. Counselor Flynn, we were just going to go straight to the panelists, the administration, and the guest panelists. Did you have any opening remarks or?
Hey, Counselor Edwards, I apologize for being late. I'll go. Yeah, please go right to the panel, to the experts, and I want to listen. I want to learn more about it and work with my colleagues to come up with the right solution for everybody. So thank you, Counselor Edwards, and thank you, Counselor Bach, as well.
Thank you, Counselor Flynn. So we'll just go ahead and go in order of the way I've announced, folks. So we'll start with Lynn Spillage, Chair of the Boston Landmarks Commission. Lynn?
Thank you. I'm happy with this. I think there are compromises, but it's important, I think, to Boston that we go forward with this, with something with a high chance of success with the legislature. The way the legislation is written now, to me, has always been unfair and irrational. A landmark that's important to Boston should be landmarkable. It's never made sense to me that the bar had to be higher than that. And has been brought up many times before, there's a real lack of equity there, and that the way the system operates now heavily favors the better resourced neighborhoods. I admit I don't understand the permitting and development process as well as probably everybody else in this meeting. but I think the compromise that Kenzie's crafted seems very reasonable to me and introduces the predictability that's essential for developers. So thanks.
Thank you. Roseanne Foley?
Good afternoon, Madam Chair. I hope you can hear me. Great. With the issues I had getting in, I was worried about it. I echo, obviously, Lynn's comments. It has seemed very much inequitable in my past few years of dealing with folks trying to landmark significant properties that they were not able to do so. And it seemed as if this would be a very, as Councillor Bach said, elegant solution that would bring us into line with other cities and towns in Massachusetts and across the nation that designate locally significant properties. We are getting more and more requests for architectural conservation districts, single property, because this is the only way folks can try to preserve their local history. And the process of getting the steering committees in place to move forward on these and kind of setting up the process is a lot more work than simply funding a study report, as with everything else. So with that, I'm here to answer questions and basically help the conversation move forward because this needs to happen. Thanks.
Thank you. And Chief Mariama White-Hammond.
No, I just want to applaud this effort. I think as Roseanne has mentioned, you know, I know we've had conversations before about the backlog we have at Landmarks, and that will only continue to grow because single building architectural districts do not take significantly less time than full architectural districts. And so it means that we end up having a process that's really a significant burden for a single building. That process was set up for an area that has multiple buildings and to create harmony between them and to create, you know, opportunities for the folks to work together. Going through those steps as if there are multiple buildings when there really isn't is a challenge. And I think, you know, I'm excited to see this move forward. I know that it is just the first step, and then we'll have the work that we need to do at the state. And I look forward to supporting and figuring out how we do that. I think, as an example, the Shirley Eustace building, the complex that we just landmarked, because the barn is connected to a space that has already been in the National Historic Register, it was relatively easy to pull the whole site together. But it is worth noting that there is a site there that we hope significant more research will be done to illuminate its role and its you know, probable dwelling place of enslaved peoples in that neighborhood. And had it been on its own, we would not have been able to protect and landmark that building. So I think there are concrete examples here in the city already of places and spaces that illuminate some of the unheralded history of our city, history that the state has not yet chosen to grapple with. And if we were to have this local landmark designation option, we could protect those sites. And our goal is not just to protect them as buildings that nobody knows, but really our hope is to grow our capacity to stimulate further research, further designating, making those sites places that people want to go to. We have instances where people are living in buildings that have been landmarked, and I'm not sure that they even know the significance. So there's a lot more work that we need to do, but it does start with being able to protect those spaces and move them forward. And I want to add to that is that we have many spaces that are of deep, significant history to a local community that it could take years before they're considered sort of national significance, just kind of the way that things go, but they are of deep significance to us now. I think about someone like Doris Bunty, who passed away recently. And in the newspaper, they finally were sort of sharing the fullness of her story. And I knew Doris Bunty and had not known the fullness of that. And so, again, we have a real opportunity to be at the forefront. And I thank Councillor Block for her leadership and stewarding this. This is not the sexiest of topics ever, but it really will provide us with an essential tool that will allow the landmarks department to work a little bit more efficiently and allow us to honor the wide range of history in our city. And also thank you to Councillor Edwards for leading the session, and Councillor Breeden in her absence for her attention also to this matter. So thank you.
Thank you so much. And Councillor Brock, we're just going to go to the other panelists, right? Okay. So moving on to Greg Gaylor, Executive Director of the Boston Preservation Alliance.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. And I as well want to thank Councilors Bach and Breeden for bringing this forward, and Councilor Edwards for chairing the committee. This is an important issue. I've been involved in the preservation world for over 30 years. I've been in my role at the Alliance for 9. And, you know, in that 9 years, I've always been puzzled and scratched my head about this language. And when I did reach out to colleagues around the country and asked how they're landmarking, it's called a little bit different in different places. Some call it landmarking, call it other things. But when I asked and said, oh, are you allowed to, you know, protect through a landmarking type process buildings of local significance, I got the answer of course, why wouldn't you be able to? And when I said in Boston you couldn't, everyone basically said, that's nuts. So I'm glad we're finally addressing this issue. It's been a bureaucratic burden for the Landmarks Commission for years, because this is always the hurdle that on so many projects that you had to finesse for a building that was clearly of significance to Bostonians, of concern to local residents, that they wanted to protect and to cherish and to allow future generations to learn from these places and the stories they contain. You know, some of these buildings just, you know, wouldn't make the standard. So I'm so pleased that we're finally working to address this challenge for everyone. I also, you know, want to be clear that this, you know, this isn't a goal to landmark the entire city or an attempt to stop existing projects in their tracks. The Preservation Alliance works with many developers and architects in forwarding project, and you know, we always say the work we do is about smartly evolving the city. And I think this change will allow us to more smartly protect and think about how we evolve the city. So I thank you for working to try to make this happen. Now, that being said, we understand predictability is important, not just for the real estate community and the development community, but for residents and neighbors and the Landmarks Commission. So I think, you know, the idea of working in this language and the suggestions Councilor Box makes are good ones. I think this is a compromise we can live with. There were a couple of questions I just wanted to ask or raise, and you know, the building permits or ZBA variances approved is one that just made me pause when I was looking at the proposal. You know, why it's not an and, you know, why this, you know, can't be limited to projects that are basically ready to hit the ground. But we know that it takes a long time in Boston, that it's a long runway from conception to development to raising the funds to approve projects. So we understand that reality. I just want to make sure that we're doing what we can to make sure we don't create an easy backdoor for exemptions that really just defeats the goals that we're all collectively trying to reach here. And I will speculate on what the answer is, but I'll let you know, the folks from the real estate side speak. But I think, you know, some of these challenges relate to the larger need to review the approval process in Boston, and this is not going to solve that problem. That's not our goal here. But we just want to make sure that, you know, we all know projects somehow through the magic of extensions that I don't fully understand. Well, Councilor Bach, you did list those timelines of, you know, 2 years, 6 months. I can't remember exactly what they were. We also know that there are projects that have gone on for years and years and years and years with some level of approval. And we just want to make sure that you know, that we don't create an opportunity or a rush to get to that sort of situation, so that sites that we all believe are trying to be protected through this adjustment are protected in a reasonable period of time. If a project that's sort of in the process doesn't go forward, if a project's, has its permitting and moves forward in a reasonable manner, that's fine. But I'd hate to see us, and I don't think it'd be fair to the Landmarks Commission, that 10 years down the road, there's a project that appears that somehow managed to get extensions in is clearly of local significance. We will have residents in an uproar if that were the case. So I think as we look at the proposed specific language, Councilor Buck, that you said we sent, we just kind of keep that in mind. But overall, I think this is a great compromise that we can live with. We just need to look at the details of the language and make sure we're not doing anything inadvertently. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Greg Vassell, Chief Executive Officer of the Greater Boston Real Estate Board.
Councilor Edwards, thank you. Thank you for your leadership on the Government Applications Committee. And I'd like to thank Councilor Bach as well for all her hard work that she put into the memo and tackling this issue. We were encouraged by Councilor Bach's memo because I think it really was a reflection of how she listened and how she put a lot of time and effort into trying to solve the issues that we raised back in February. And so, I'm not going to belabor the point anymore. I would actually like to cede my time over to my colleague, Adam Hunley, who's an attorney at Goulston and Storrs who practices in this area that may have a lot more thoughtful insight into some of those changes than I would.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thanks, Greg. So as Greg mentioned, I'm Adam Hunley. I'm a partner at Goulston and Storrs downtown. Thanks for letting me speak. I'm very aware you don't have to give this much time and this role to a random lawyer in the Boston real estate community. So I very much appreciate this. I think I mentioned the first time we spoke, I'm very conflicted about this since I am a preservationist at heart. In fact, I've had the good pleasure of working with most people in this meeting when I was on the Landmarks Commission. The thing is, my day job is to work with the real estate and the development community. And I hear from them all the time that arguably the most important thing to them, or one of the top 3 or 4 most important things to them, is predictability, the ability to execute on their projects and complete their projects based on the underwriting they've done when they purchased sites or started permitting, the ability to see permitting through to completion, the ability to make their lenders happy. And all of that led to some concerns about the original formulation of this proposal. Councilor Bach, I loved the simplicity of the original proposal. I don't know that I've ever seen anything quite so elegant as changing one word. What I chose to do when we first talked about this is not question the proposal or oppose the proposal, because I don't oppose it. And I think although some developers would love for nothing to change, I think by and large we do understand, the development community does understand that things need to change and evolve, and that we do live in a city with profound historic resources that we need to protect. So what I did was generally support the approach and just try to figure out a way to get in some transition language that didn't change the playing field for developers who have obtained permits and approvals, or purchased a site based on an expectation of what was to come, or have spent a lot of money or worked with lenders to achieve a project that might change, that might become more risky, that might become more uncertain if this legislation passed without those kind of protections. So with that as a long-winded background, just getting to the punchline here, I like this memo too. Lynn, I liked the simplicity of your words. When you said, I like this proposal. I guess lawyers have to be a little bit more long-winded, but I do too. I think it is a very thoughtful, very well-reasoned, a very promising approach. At the risk of getting a little too dramatic, I actually think it really reflects on a really good collaboration among government, the private sector, and I guess I'm the private sector here, and the preservation community. Councilor Bach, as you said, I don't think anybody gets exactly what they wanted. I'm sure the preservation community would like the word eligible more often in the bottom chart of your memo. I might like the word exempt more often, but we each got something out of this. And I think it's something that we can get comfortable with. it would reflect my understanding of the development and real estate community's most important issues and concerns here. As we all know, the devil's in the details. We'd certainly like to look at the language too. You know, we kicked around whether there might be other words that should be added about institutional master plans, conditional use permits, some of the other kinds of relief that the projects can get. I'm not sure that's critical. I do think, Councillor Bach, you hit at the most important permits and approvals and circumstances that the development community is focused on. So I'd like to think that we could support this memo, you know, without significant additions or changes, work with everybody on the exact wording and hope that we come up with something that everybody's comfortable with. Greg, a couple points in response to your comments. I'm sure you can imagine where I would come out on this. I certainly like the idea of building permits or variances as a key to the exemption. You know, my thought process is just that variances are very hard to get. They're very risky. We avoid them, frankly, when we can. They take time and money, but when you get them, you typically don't have 100% construction plans, and there's still a process to get through before you can start construction. So I would feel like if you have one or the other, that means you've invested a lot of time and a lot of effort, and you're close to the finish line, but you might not quite be there, and you might not have both of those approvals in effect. And I like the idea of contemplating that there could be extensions that keep a building permit or a variance alive for longer than expected. I guess what I'd point out, and Councillor Bach, you got at this point too, there are hard and fast rules for when variances expire and building permits expire. In my mind, there's nothing automatic about extensions. They are purely discretionary from ISD and the Board of Appeal. They're very risky. We don't like to do them. We don't like, as developers, trying to keep permits alive and asking for extensions because we don't know for certain that we're going to get them. And I guarantee you that lenders don't like that. But sometimes it just happens to be a necessity for circumstances beyond developers' control. I think, frankly, we've all seen there have been a lot of extension requests over the last year or two because of COVID. And I've appreciated the board has been generally accommodating. You know, circumstances do come up. So I would appreciate it if that language could stay in here. So again, I liked all of the nuances and details, Councillor Bach, of the memo you put together. And I'm encouraged by this and hope that we can see this through to completion in a way that's satisfactory and comfortable for everybody. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that was, unless we have some public testimony, I don't think we do. I think that was everybody who had signed up. Councilor Flynn texted me and let me know he couldn't stay on for the rest of the conversation, but he was also encouraged by the memo and the language as the balance that it seems to have struck. I think the key word everyone has said today is about compromise and balance and wanting to get something done, and wanting to get something passed at the State House. So I will turn it back over to the lead sponsor, but in terms of the next steps, I know Councillor Bach, when you shared your screen, did you put the new language up on the screen?
I didn't, but I was going to offer to do that just for a second, Councillor Edwards.
Okay, please do. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, again, here we go. I think this is. So I guess what I would say is I tried this is the original language of this is our filing, mine and Councillor Braden's. And then this is the language. And for anybody watching at home, this is the and that we replaced with a comma in the original here. And then what I tried doing was literally just sort of writing into legal-ish language in red what was in that memo, those kind of 3 points. And so I guess my suggestion, Councillor Edwards, would be that, I mean, we've actually, I think Christine's already circulated this, but that, you know, based on the fact that it seems like we have agreement today around the basis, you know, conceptual compromise, that everybody kind of go and review that and sort of, you know, send edits and comments back to the committee so that we nail down something that everybody's comfortable with. But I don't want to force people to do that legal reading on the spot. But I do think that, and I heard I heard Greg Gaylor's point about let's just make sure we don't create like a sudden rush, like a sort of artificial kind of great loophole that causes a bunch of people who don't actually have a project to kind of go for variances or whatever. So just thinking about that. And I heard Adam's point. I mean, I think Adam, obviously Greg Gaylor brought up the idea of like, could we have that be an and get rid of the variances? And I know, we had originally you'd suggested, Adam, those conditional uses and the IMPs and stuff. I think the way I was thinking about it was, we really do want to outsource the expiration decision to kind of competent bodies, right? And so that you've got the Zoning Board of Appeals and you've got ISD making decisions on expiration through a regular process now. And the thing about most types of zoning, most of those other things, as you know, is they don't have the same kind of clear-cut expiration structure. And so it felt like we had to put something in on PDAs, and that's why that 2-year thing, because when you get a PDA, you don't get a variance, right? But but I think that feels to me like a good middle place to land. But I'm happy to have everybody kind of like take it home and kick the tires just to make sure that we're not missing something, or if there's a more elegant way of drafting some of it. As you could see from that sort of red block of text, there's a reason that I thought it would be clearer to discuss in memo form than in kind of legal sentence form. But I still think we should all do that. So that would be my suggestion, Councillor Edwards, for next steps, is that we just make sure everybody's got that, and give people a bit of a window to get back to the committee with any thoughts or tweaks. But certainly, I would hope to be able to move towards council passage sooner rather than later, because as we all know, there's a runway up at the State House, and like everyone said, what's important to me is that we have something that we all feel comfortable about supporting at the State House, so that we can kind of bring it from here into reality.
That makes sense, Councillor Bach. I think most people do appreciate the concepts, and the memo explains the end goal. And from what I heard from most of the conversation, those goals seem to be laudable and respected. So I think what we're going to use is this time. I don't know if you want to talk about dates later on. If you want passage, did you want to have a brief working session again on this language?
I think that I think my instinct would be that obviously this language, I think Christine's gotten, it's part of the record for this working session. And if you want, I'll throw it for one more second and just show people. So basically, this first sentence, it says, however, this substitution of language enacted by section 1. So that's what's going on up here, where we replace the and with the comma. It won't apply to any property which, upon the effective date of this act, has these building permits that are approved by the city of Boston, or zoning variances granted by the ZBA that are in effect and unexpired for so long as they're in effect and unexpired. And then if there's anything with a PDA, also as of that effective date, then it doesn't apply until 2 years after. And then after those 2 years, if there's a piece of the PDA where subsequently a building permit's been granted, then as long as that is still in effect and unexpired, that substitution of language doesn't apply there. And then the last edit was just instead of saying it will take effect immediately, saying it will take effect upon the next July 1st following its passage. So I think, Councillor Edwards, since all of that is just sort of, it's me scrivenering the conceptual conversation we've had.
Right.
My instinct would be to sort of maybe take people's scrivener's notes to the committee, and we might not need to have another working session unless, in that process, something gets kicked up that sort of requires substantive conversation.
I think that's fair, because your memo summarizes what the goals of those exceptions are. And so it's really just making sure that those goals and this language absolutely align, that there's really very, very little chance of sunlight getting in between the goals and the language. As Greg Gaylor had brought up some concerns. And I also would be, for those who know how passage works, we bring it before with the committee report. And I want to be able to explain that there is no sunlight before when we present it to, our colleagues for a vote, and what concerns of, the rush to get things done or to move faster has been considered. And we believe this language doesn't cause that, or we get to language that doesn't cause that. So I'm happy to take this time if everyone wants to take this draft. And I would encourage you, if you have any red flags about this language, to please let us know immediately. And then it is part of the public record for people to consume, to criticize, to come back with. But I think what I've heard from all sides, administration, non-administration, developer side, preservationist side, is that the goals are clear and they are fair and they are things that we want and they can pass the State House. And thank you, Councilor Bach, for your leadership and clarifying moment, and also just making sure that you did all this background work. We really appreciate that.
No, thank you, Councilor Edwards, and everybody on the call. It's been a collective effort here. So, yeah, I think that's everything for me.
Okay. All right, then. With that, I'm going to close out this working session. Again, encourage folks, any concerns you have about the proposed language, please let us know as soon as possible. Thank you.
Thank you all. Have a good night.
Thank you.